Welcome to 28 Days and
The
Beyond.
show where we talk about our history, our heritage, and our culture.
I'm Amari.
I'm Charisma. Welcome.
What's up, Charisma? How you doing?
I am doing well. How are you?
Everything is nice. Everything is nice. So look, as we've been jumping into a lot of the things that have happened in the past year, up until from last season to this season, as well as moving forward, one of the major things that happened right there on the soil of the Capitol building was a planned takeover. I mean, I don't even know how you would characterize it. The train was crazy,
Treason.
right?
Treason. That's how you would characterize it. I mean, there's really no other way to put it. And I've just been so blown away. Not that I'm surprised, because we know the sordid history of this country and we know the room that is made for white supremacy and the ideology around what happened at the Capitol riot. But, I think about specifically the young lady, I can't remember her name, but the young woman who stole Nancy Pelosi's computer and intended to sell that information to Russia, and she's now at home with her mother with an ankle monitor. And I can't help but think about the young man from 13th who was taken to Rikers for 3 years and thrown into solitary confinement for stealing a backpack, and later died
Mhm.
because of the torture that he endured by being there. Like,
Right.
it's insane to me, honestly. It's insane.
Well, one of the things that we can hear a million different analysts and pundits weighing in, but today we're joined by someone who is actually based in DC, who was there, who works on
Yeah.
Capitol Hill. Camila DeChalus, who is a journalist. She's worked on Capitol Hill for the past couple of years, and she's going to give us some insight into this, as well as just the environment in DC and obviously throughout the country. So welcome, Camila. How you doing?
Hi,
Welcome,
thanks for having
Camila.
me. Thank you.
Our pleasure.
Yeah. So break it down. What's how do we make sense of this?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is that this is not something where you can ask veteran journalists how they navigated this reality, because this is the first time this has ever happened. And for a lot of journalists who have spent weeks, months, years covering Capitol Hill, spending day in and day out, being there, covering legislation, covering lawmakers, this was something that, you spend your whole life, or you spend your whole career trajectory trying to convey what's happening on Capitol Hill, kind of taking a inside look from the outside of, what are the key players, what's happening, and for you to be part of the story when it actually is happening. And really feeling that sense of fear that, your life could be in jeopardy. That's a really big thing. A lot of people focus on the riot and, how the lawmakers were being protected, but a lot of journalists were really trapped in rooms trying to protect themselves. And especially, I know journalists of color who were up on the Hill that day, they felt another sense of fear that, their lives were really in jeopardy, being Black, being of color, and being targeted, especially during that time.
Yeah, I mean,
So
one of
now
the things.
looking at that experience and being there and being a part of that fear, what is it like for you now, just being there and
Well, now it's being extremely cautious. I mean, there's a lot of resources out there for journalists now, but there's two components. One, having really honest conversations with our newsrooms of how we feel now after the aftermath of it, when we really have to take our safety seriously and really take extra measures. I mean, it's also a pandemic that's happening as well. And I don't know if a lot of people are familiar, but there was huge spikes of COVID cases amongst lawmakers a few months ago. And it's still happening. There's some lawmakers who were refusing to wear masks. So even doing your simple job of just asking a lawmaker a question about a bill actually could have put your life in danger. And so navigating that was difficult. But then now, especially after the riot, it's another sense of, even walking to the metro after you leave the Capitol Hill is also a safety hazard now. And so, those are kind of some things, or hiding your badge sometimes so that maybe people, because it says your organization, it says that you're a journalist or media on your badge. And so sometimes that maybe, hiding it a little bit or being very aware when you're out in public. And so I think some things like that have just been really eye-opening. And, having those honest conversations with your newsrooms, but also having these conversations amongst like my colleagues of color, who are journalists as well, has been really insightful to kind of hear how they're navigating this. And, this is a new reality that nobody was mentally prepared for to
Yeah.
navigate. So just really taking it like one day at a time.
Now that we have a new administration in office, how do you feel things are going to be just in terms of the feeling of being there and being safe as a journalist of color being at the Capitol?
Well, I've already seen some differences already. For example, I was just tuning into a committee hearing where they never before really addressed this, but because now, well, Democrats control the House, but now Senate as well. There's now a new procedure in place which says that it's mandatory to wear a face mask during committee hearings. And you would think like, oh, people were doing that before, but in reality weren't. And so there's now more protocols in place, to kind of ensure not only the safety of all their lawmakers, but also of journalists who are covering them. So you see like really minor now procedural changes, even like wearing a face mask or really implementing the social distancing that makes you feel a little bit safer, because that was a really big concern covering Capitol Hill during the pandemic for me, was that, I don't want to get COVID just simply asking questions a lawmaker who refused to wear a mask.
Right.
So there's now, you kind of see, the rhetoric has really toned down amongst, really conservative lawmakers, but then also now there's just more procedures in place to kind of make it a little bit safer for people inside the building.
One of the things that I think has really the past 4 years, we've seen one calamitous event overshadowing a previous calamitous. In other words, the events just kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And I'm saying that because a lot of emphasis has been placed on the riot, but we really know that, this was the presidency of fake news and anti-journalism, right? So this is actually, in many ways, the culmination of something that had been set to play, 4 years ago. How do you think the culture of journalism and reporting on Capitol Hill has been affected by the past 4 years, and how will it be moving forward?
I mean, I think it's been affected a great deal. I think a lot of times in my reporting, it's not, just making sure I'm saying, I think this is something I try to watch all the time, is that to not just say, okay, this Republican or this Democrat said this and say that this is a fact. It's to make sure that I'm going the extra mile to really fact check what they're saying. I've been caught a few times being like, okay, this is a big story because he's saying this, but then fact checking and being like, oh, well, this is actually infactual. And sometimes that is a story in itself, of just saying like, hey, I know, this information's out there, but here's the reality of it. Which I had to do a few times covering like Trump's border wall and saying that, okay, he said he built 500 miles of border wall, but then in actuality, it's only one new mile. And so it's things like that. But I think there's maybe like a bigger emphasis on just making sure that you have your facts correct, because, you hear people joking about fake news, but, it's internalized, right? Of where then you kind of have this like, oh, is this actually right? And so a lot of times it's like triple checking with my sources to make sure this is correct, and making sure I have the proof or the information to kind of back up what I'm trying to report on. So that's, I think, journalism's like now held to a little bit of a higher degree, because we feel like now we have just much more to prove.
Yeah, that makes sense. So is there anything that you're really looking forward to now that the new administration is in office, in terms of what journalism is going to look like and what you'll be able to do as a journalist while you're there?
Yeah, I think one of my biggest things is accessibility. I think with the previous administration, it was very, very hard to contact key administration officials or even people that ran certain departments. There was like a lot of, okay, I know this leak, but is this true? And kind of going back and forth, or saying like, okay, I know I saw a tweet from the president, but can you verify it? And so I think I've already been seeing that there's a little bit more transparency now, of where and more of like rapid responses. So it's a little bit easier to fact check, and it's a little bit easier to kind of talk to administration officials to really understand what's going on. And so I think we've kind of, it's interesting in these, it's only been a few weeks, but the response times is this a complete, it's crazy for me to be like, oh wow, I used to wait 7 days for a response, and now I'm getting it back in 20 minutes. Or,
Wow.
they just,
Wow.
yeah, it's just like, oh, it's really easy for me to now to reach out to this administration official when I used to have to go back and forth between different department officials to get one answer. And so I think that's what I'm looking forward to. I think a little bit more transparency of covering certain departments, more interviews, more just accessibility to the administration. I think that's going to be a really nice change.
Well, it looks like we're moving in the right direction, so hopefully we'll continue to progress.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you so much for joining us, Camila. I mean, this is it I think you started off the interview by saying, saying it perfectly. There is no point of reference for this. You know what I mean? We're all going through this for the first time. It doesn't matter, what profession you're in, or I mean, we're all trying to really scratching our head like what the heck is going on. But it's good to know that, at least you're there continuing to do the work in earnest, and hopefully, you'll continue
Yes.
to provide for us accurate information about what's really happening, and so people can really know what's going on. So thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah.
yeah, thanks
Thank
for
you,
having me.
Camila.
This has been another episode of 28 Days and Beyond.
The show where we talk about our history, our heritage, and our culture. We'll see you next time.
Peace.